There is a big issue in the Royale community that is now impacting lots of different content creators as well as players, and it has to do with a wave of impersonators. Now, if you guys follow any other Royale content creators, chances are you've probably seen a handful of them talk about being impersonated in Royale, and I myself have had my own personal experiences with this. However, I feel like the way people are going about handling this and the way people are addressing it is just making the situation 1,000 times worse, and so I want to go ahead and give you guys my brutally honest opinions on this whole situation, what happened to me in the past because I've been impersonated, and what I did to make it stop. Because unfortunately, the way people are going about it, babe, it's not working. Okay, it's not working. But essentially, if you guys don't know, there has recently been this influx, like this massive influx of, I don't know, bots or just random players impersonating other people in Royale. And typically, impersonation is limited to oftentimes content creators. But in recent ways, it seems as though people are just actually impersonating really anybody in Royale. And this could be for a variety of reasons. It could be because they're trying to scam people. It could be because, they are wanting people to think they're the YouTuber, whatever it might be, right? There's a variety of reasons why people may do this. Maybe they just really like your outfit and don't want to come up with one by themselves. But I think the core reason that all of these kind of whittle down to is the concept of wanting attention. And unfortunately, when you recognize what is happening and you talk about it publicly a lot, it gives that person the attention they're looking for, which I'll get into in a second here. But essentially, yes, there's been a variety of people who have come to Reddit, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, etc., ranging from large content creators to smaller content creators to just everyday players who've been airing out their grievances with being, copied or having people impersonate them. And I think there's a core difference between impersonation and copying that we have to kind of emphasize here. Impersonation is the attempt of somebody to actively pretend to be you, right? So if someone was making a Roblox account called Pommy Talks and they were making their avatar the exact same as mine and were linking my YouTube channel in their bio and stuff like that, that would be impersonation, because there's a very obvious attempt to confuse people and confuse the general public about whether or not they're actually me. The same thing can be said for players who say, like, Pommy backup account, which that's come up several times. I don't have a backup account, or Pommy alt. I don't have an alt account. Stuff like that, where people will, very purposefully try to mislead consumers, and that is obviously an attempt at impersonation. However, when it comes down to copying, I think some people misunderstand that copying is different. Oftentimes, although it's annoying and probably is, agitating as a creator, it's not quite as evil, or I don't know, I'm forgetting the word, but it's not as vindictive as some people claim to be. Oftentimes, copying comes from a sort of flattery where someone is really appreciative of the kind of work you do and they just don't quite know how to appropriately show that appreciation, and sometimes they do it in inappropriate ways, which is copying your content, copying your style, whatever it might be. And I think, people oftentimes have difficulty identifying what is actually copying versus what is just inspiration. And especially in like gaming communities or content creation, there's always people accusing other people of copying them, whatever. But when it comes down to copying, and what I'm talking about is when someone basically takes your Royale outfit or your avatar design and copies it down to the very last detail, but maybe they have a different username, or maybe they're not pretending to be you. That's like the key difference here, okay? There's impersonation, which in my opinion is meant to be more aggressive and to potentially damage or mislead somebody's reputation. And copying is just someone having an appreciation for your stuff but not knowing how to properly show it and to be respectful to your intellectual property. Now, when it comes to impersonation, I think people's immediate reaction is to go and be like, hey guys, this isn't me, don't follow this person, don't interact with them, which that's a normal human reaction, which I can understand. However, as someone that has had a variety of instances where I've been impersonated, I can tell you that is the absolute worst thing you could possibly do, regardless of if you're a creator or just a general player. The reason is because when there's a situation that maybe isn't that great, you don't want to bring attention to it, because as a creator or just as a separate individual, typically the people who associate with you, they wouldn't even know about this impersonator unless you had told them. And that's the most important thing to acknowledge here, is that when you acknowledge somebody being, trying to agitate you or trying to ruffle your feathers, you are actively bringing more eyes to that subject, so therefore you are elevating that person and giving them the attention that they want. In my specific situation, to go back to a story time, when I first started my channel, I was creating like some Royale content, which I do plan on branching out to other videos. Guys, there's going to be a different video coming out later this week that's not really related to Roblox. But essentially, I would, just do kind of commentary stuff about making plays, about, stuff going on in Roblox, a Royale, Monsterverse, etc. And as a result, there was a channel that popped up that every time I posted a video, they would copy it. And it wasn't like, just someone talk about the same situations. Because I think sometimes people misinterpret that, hey, if there's big news in the Royale community, obviously every other Royale creator is going to make a video about that topic. That's how the internet works. Nobody owns the right to news or owns the right to discuss a situation, right? It's, we all have the ability to do that because it's public information. But what was interesting about the situation was that anytime I brought up an opinion piece, or I talked about a Monsterverse update that I liked, or I talked about about, just my genuine opinions about something, this other account would go and would completely copy my thumbnail down to the hex codes, down to the fonts, down to the layout with like the Monsterverse character, the arrows, everything, absolutely everything. They would copy. And then in their video, you could tell by their voice that this person, was old enough to understand what they were doing was wrong. They sounded to be about a teenager, right? And their content was basically just almost word for word. Like, I cannot even make this stuff up, regurgitating exactly what I had said, like word for word. If you were to transcribe both the videos and put the documents beside each other, the only difference would be that this person kept stuttering because they were trying so hard to repeat everything I'd said, which on one hand, it's like, oh, like they must really like my content. That's interesting. But on the other hand, it's kind of like, oh, well, I put effort into making my content and this person's basically just regurgitating everything I'm saying, because it's not necessarily the concept of someone copying you that's annoying. It's what comes after, when people then come to your channel as the bigger creator, and people love to believe smaller creators, and I like that too. Like, I think we should uplift smaller creators, but they love to be like a devil's advocate or to like be some sort of like, I don't know, speaker on behalf of like smaller channels to uplift their voices. And so when a YouTuber or just a general consumer comes across the other person's video and sees that my video as a larger creator at the time was, basically the exact same, they might assume that I copied them. They might not assume that this smaller creator who posted the video after me copied me, because some people just don't put two and two together, right? And so then that results in me getting harassment or people saying I'm copying somebody else when I work very hard to be different. To my understanding, I am one of the only Roblox YouTubers that has a VTuber model, and that was something that I acknowledged when I was going into the space and that I really wanted to incorporate into my content. It's what makes my channel unique. Obviously, other creators can have VTuber models and stuff like that, but I feel like I've worked really hard to try and have a distinct branding, and so it was a little bit annoying, right? Like, rightfully so. It's kind of like, oh, well, that's kind of annoying. But you know what I didn't do? I didn't contact this person, I didn't talk about it, and I didn't mention it until right now. I have not mentioned this to absolutely anybody else ever, and it's because that is the worst possible thing you could do. You have to go back to like the very basics at the core of what they're doing and think, why would this person be copying me? Why would they be trying to almost impersonate me, copy my content, mislead consumers? Because they want attention. And if people see you're doing something that's making you successful, they're oftentimes going to mimic it. That's how capitalism works. That's how the economy works. That's how life works. And you can't take it as this personal jab every time it happens, because it really isn't. It's more so of a compliment that your content is good enough that someone wants to copy it. And so although this person, basically half an hour after I released my video, they released a video of the same subject, same thumbnail, same script, everything, which I don't script my videos. They were just like regurgitating what I was saying, which made it sound kind of bizarre. But regardless, they would just post that stuff and I never once said anything. I know some people might want to go and, send them a nice message and be like, hey, saw your video, like, can you maybe not copy me? But my personal experience is when you reach out to people who are already being unreasonable, they're not going to magically become reasonable. You know what I mean? Like, someone who's already going out of their way to stalk your channel, to directly copy everything, to impersonate you even to a degree, they're obviously not a reasonable person, because no reasonable person would do that. So there's no sense in trying to reason with someone who lacks reason. You know what I mean? Like, just put two and two together, it doesn't make sense. And so I ignored it. And I never mentioned it. And when someone would comment about it, I would just delete the comment, because I'm like, I don't want to, engage with this. I don't care. And you know what? I ignored it. I wouldn't look at the channel, which I think sometimes people will like antagonize themselves and look at the channel and be like, oh my God, they copied me again. And oh my God. I quite literally just did not interact with them, never looked at their content. And guess what? About a month after they started copying me, they completely went off the internet. Yes, you heard it correctly. Because I didn't engage with it and they didn't get the attention they wanted, they disappeared. Because at the end of the day, that was their goal. Not to spread awareness, not to make commentary content, because if they wanted to do that, they'd have their own distinct brand. The whole point was to get my attention and to make me instigate some sort of drama or interaction with them, because they wanted attention. And I didn't give it to them. And why? Because I didn't want to waste my time. I knew it would just create a bigger situation. I would somehow be painted as a bad person. I ignored it. And eventually, they just went away. Because that's what happens. People get bored of copying you. People get bored of playing games in their own minds. People get bored of that stuff and they move on. It's a lot more impactful for you than it is for the person doing it, which is unfortunate, but that is the reality. And so when it comes to, I've seen a handful of creators that are, it seems like every other day, or on Twitter. Munchkin, stop doing that. He wants a salad. Who are on Twitter, who are on YouTube, whatever, like, guys, I'm being impersonated again. Guys, this person's following me. Guys, this person has my username. And every day, give me a second, I need to take away his cardboard. He really wants a salad. In case you guys didn't know, rabbits actually snack on cardboard, and Munchkin loves cardboard, and that's how he's telling me that he's hungry for his salad, which I will get him his kale and dill salad when I'm done. But regardless, there's a handful of creators I see every day that are on Twitter, on YouTube, whatever, and every second YouTube short or every other video is just them talking about someone impersonating them and how they're so angry and how it's upsetting them and how dare they do that. And that personally, it's just not healthy. It's not healthy for you, and it's not healthy for your viewer base, because then it's almost like, yes, you tell people not to harass anybody, but when you're actively calling somebody out who is, rightfully, they are doing you wrong. Like, I'm not saying that they're innocent, they're not. But when you're calling someone out and say, hey guys, but don't harass them, but you show their full username, you're then weaponizing your audience to go and harass that person. And what is that doing? It's giving them attention, and it's giving them ammunition to paint themselves as a victim. At the core of it, the creator who's being impersonated is the victim. But when you engage and when you instigate and when you weaponize your audience, you can then be painted as the aggressor, and then the impersonator can act as a victim and make you look like a bad person, which is the absolute worst thing you want to do. Which is why I just don't know. I just don't quite understand why people are so fixated on people impersonating them. I get it's annoying. Trust me, I've been through it as well. This is not like an isolated thing as much as I wish it was. It happens to almost everybody on the internet. But the best advice I can give anybody who's struggling with being impersonated, whether you're a content creator or whether you're just like a regular, average, everyday player, is to not acknowledge it and not engage with it. Block the person and move on. The more attention you bring to it, the more you are fueling their obsession with getting attention. That's what you're doing. You are feeding them exactly what they want. You know what I mean? And it just doesn't make sense to keep engaging with something that isn't serving you. And that is honestly, it seems like impacting your mental health. And again, this isn't any particular creator that I'm talking about here. This is a core, or I'd say like a consistent group of people that are constantly, almost every other day, talking about being impersonated. And I get it's annoying. And I get it feels like it's the end of the world, or that it feels like insulting because you've worked hard to make your own brand and you have your own distinct identity, and someone's just coming over here and taking it. But the truth is, if you didn't talk about it, if you didn't mention it, if you didn't bring attention to it, your audience wouldn't know about it. So they would move on. Most of the times, audiences won't find that kind of content because that person is, again, impersonating you. Their stuff might be suppressed in the algorithm because they're not original, whatever. Their stuff probably won't be seen because they're not original. And the general viewer base, if they know your channel, will be able to pick apart, oh, this person's impersonating this person, and they won't engage. But when you, as a creator who is bigger than the impersonator typically, brings attention to it constantly, you are giving that person views and are boosting their profile so they can potentially profit off of impersonating you. You are giving them the power. In these situations, I wish people recognize that they, as the original person or as the original creator, the person who created this persona, this, channel, whatever, you have the power to dictate what kind of words you let into, your safe space, what kind of, influences you allow to impact your life, and who you engage with. And I think it is unhealthy to a degree to constantly be, stalking or like constantly doing updates on people impersonating you, because at the end of the day, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but calling these people out just makes it 10 times worse. It's very similar with cancel culture or when people are dogpiling you. If you interact with it, if you haven't done anything wrong, right, don't interact with it. That's like the best course of action. If you actually made a mistake, okay, apologize and be like, oops, my bad, guys, like, sorry. If you haven't done anything wrong, it's the same thing with cancel culture as it is with impersonation. You just do not interact with it. Because the more you interact with it, the more you fuel the fire, the more you make people upset. And you could, even in situations where you are in the wrong, you don't want to keep apologizing. You want to just give one apology and then be done with it. Because the more apologies you give, or the more statements you make about it, the more you drag on the situation, the more attention you bring to it, the more outlets you give for people to berate you, to pick apart your apology, to tell you you're not good enough. And at the end of the day, I think it's important to take accountability when you make a mistake, but at the same time, it's like if you haven't really done anything abhorrent and people are actively trying to crucify you online, interacting with it or fueling the fire or trying to defend yourself even though you know you're innocent and you want to defend yourself, I know it's human nature, don't do it. And the same thing applies again to impersonation. At the end of the day, you give people the power they have over you. And unfortunately, when you let people into your space or into your mindset, it allows them to just make a mockery of you, which I don't think is, very healthy for your mental health, for anybody else's mental health. At the end of the day, you have to focus on what you can control as a content creator, as a player. You can control how you behave, you can control what you say, and you can control how, you choose to make content. You cannot control how other people perceive you. You cannot control what people say about you, and you cannot control what other people choose to do with publicly available assets. And even if it means they're impersonating you or they're copying you, if the assets are public, at the end of the day, you don't have any right to them. So I know it's tricky and it sucks, but at the end of the day, it's something that happens to everybody, and unfortunately, the best course of action, at least from my experience, is to quite literally just ignore it. And I know, you oftentimes hear that with people who are, getting bullied. I mean, I would hear that when I was getting bullied in school. I'd be like, oh, just ignore it. That's not really the same thing. If it's getting pretty aggressive, then, report it to the proper authorities. But, dramatizing stuff or dragging it out or constantly using your platform to kind of subsequently uplift somebody who is doing you dirty, just not the best course of action. So this was just like a little story time rant type suggestion video for anybody who's being impacted by impersonation, because it's becoming a lot more common in Royale High. I think people are trying to scam other people. Is that if you are the victim of impersonation, I recommend reporting it to Royale High with screenshots saying this person is trying to impersonate me to, I don't know, scam people, whatever. If you can, get screenshots of the outfit, show that, you know, it's your original outfit, your original branding, whatever. Report it to Roblox as well. Block the person and do not engage. That is the best course of action from my experience, and it has made anybody who's ever impersonated me stop after a little bit. So if you can kind of just cruise out the part that's going to be kind of tricky, where the person actually tries to get your attention, eventually they'll give up and they will just move on to the next person. So with that in mind, thank you guys so much for watching, and let me know the stories of if you guys have ever been impersonating Roblox down below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye!